Tonight, in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television, a diplomatic battle between the United States of America and the Cameroonian government. The Minister of External Relations, Lejeune Belambela, in a release today, has expressed the disapproval of the regime of President Paul Biya and the disappointment following the declarations of the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon a few days ago. The President of the Republic has indicated that the United States of America ambassador to Cameroon violated all the diplomatic norms and is not going to be forced to remain or go out of power. That is our lone headline for tonight. We shall be right back. Stay with us. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television. Before we talk about the outing today of the Minister of External Relations, Lejeune Belambela, we are going to be taking you to a locality in the nation's capital that is called Ekongdue neighborhood in the country's political capital, harboring one of the hues that have given Yaoundé inhabitants or have been given the attribute town of 7 hues. What caught our attention there is a large rock with a portion of it that is falling apart and is said to be endangering the lives of local inhabitants. Details with Babla Jonathan.
It can be seen from a distance, but the journey to the natural feature that attracts every attention and has been in public discussions in Cameroon's political capital, Yaoundé, is an uphill task. The large rock is planted on a hill in Ekongdue in the Yaoundé 6 subdivision. At the foot of the rock, houses have been constructed. They are harboring over 100 families. Some were born here and others have been here for decades. They are not worried about the looming danger.
There were trees there, up here, all over here, even in front of this door, there were trees there. So when we bought our plot, we cut the trees that were there. After some time, we discovered that there was a stone there. So we went closer to the person whom we bought this plot from. The person told us that there is no problem there since they were born. That stone was like that. That they used to go there and fetch firewood. They used to go there and hunt. That's what those people told us. Even there's one grandmother here that she's always here. She used to tell us that there's no problem on that. And I myself have witnessed it. I went over there. I've gone round the stone, going this way or the other way around to look for firewood. There's no problem on it. So we are not even afraid of it since they have been there for years. And they made it also like that. So we don't have any problem on that. We are not afraid of that stone.
Je suis là plus de 40 ans.
Thierry Achiri has been living here for 40 years and says the shape or position of the rock has not changed.
La pierre est là, nous on cueille les mangues là-bas. Je suis seulement allé visiter comme ça là.
And David Betangbe has gone closer to the rock to see if it could collapse in the future and says it is buried in a deep hole. It is a source of water for several inhabitants of this part of Yaoundé.
The water that people are drinking down there, the water comes from here. Because when you go closer to that stone, you discover that there is water down, right down. That water is saving those people that are down this valley because they don't have water there. So it is through this stone that they have water here. Us, we will have our own drinking water. Everywhere here you see well. Even in front of me here, this is my water here. This well. You go behind here to this my neighbors here. They have wells there that are from these stones. So we don't have any difficulties here and we are not even afraid of that stone. There's nothing there. When we sleep us peacefully.
Ça c'est un lieu touristique pour moi.
Thierry highlights the tourist character of the rock.
Dans il y a les chambres même. La pierre est là comme ça là. Ça c'est tout un village de gens.
Born here in 1937, Christine Otele believes that God can never allow the rock to collapse.
Le rocher là ne peut jamais tomber. Moi je vous dis au nom de l'Éternel.
The Ekongdue Hill is one of the red zones in Yaoundé, and human occupation is strictly forbidden here. But many continue buying portions of land close to the rock on which houses are built. Territorial Administration Minister Paul Atanganji was already here to examine the situation and danger looming over inhabitants of Akokndwe.
Le ministre a dit que il ne fait pas que les gens soient très proches, mais il faut.
And TV says the minister urged them not to go closer to the rock.
On n'a pas dit qu'on va casser les gens.
He adds that it has not been announced that they will be forcefully evicted from the area.
Babla Jonathan painting the picture of the situation of inhabitants of that locality in the central region of Cameroon. Now, the regime of President Paul Biya responds to the U.S. ambassador to the country in a strong-worded release this afternoon. The External Relations Minister, on behalf of the government of Cameroon, completely kicked against all the utterances of Peter Balerin, responding to the atrocities committed by security forces in the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon. The government described claims of burning, looting and killings in the two Anglophone regions of the country by security forces as unfounded. The release by Lejeune Belambela equally indicated that security forces are acting within the two Anglophone regions of the country with strict respect to the law in force. It should be noted that they equally indicated in the release that they have kicked against all the statements of the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, and that it simply violates all the diplomatic norms, and that the President of the Republic of Cameroon can never be forced to stay in power. Cameroonians, according to the External Relations Minister that was writing on behalf of the government of Cameroon, has always won the presidential election as per the desire of Cameroonians, and it has always been objective and genuine. Those were that is the content of the release that has been made public by the Minister of External Relations in Cameroon. He qualified the President of the Republic as a symbol of democracy and development in the country. We of course will be telling you more on that in our subsequent newscast. And since he was reacting on the situation in the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, it has simply been a chaotic atmosphere in some localities, precisely in Lebialem and Kupe Maninguba divisions, where some local officials disappeared a few days ago. It's been 5 days now that the mayor of Mbangem municipality disappeared, and the second deputy mayor of the said municipality. Investigations are still on course. Let us take a look at the atmosphere in these localities in the following report. 3 officials in the southwest region of Cameroon, picked up 5 days ago, are still missing. The mayor of Mbangem, Eku Simon, and the second deputy mayor of the municipality, Enongene Epia, were kidnapped on the 19th of May as they were finalizing preparations ahead of the National Unity Day. Lebialem is also without its second assistant senior divisional officer, Beleng Ebenezer, after his disappearance few hours to the 2018 edition of the National Unity Day. The identities of their kidnappers are unknown, but both localities have been hit by gunfight and arrests. In Mbangem, at least 3 boys have been arrested by security forces for reasons that are up to now unknown. The atmosphere in the chief town of Kupe Maninguba division has remained chaotic during and after May 20. The area has been marked by gun battles between security forces and unknown armed civilians, with reports of how the population has opted to flee their homes and seek refuge in bushes and other stable localities. And in politics, more than 70,000 persons have so far been registered on the electoral list in the country. The figures were disclosed by the Director General of Elections, Cameroon, Abdoulaye Babale, during the start of a training workshop in Yaoundé that was in Douala today, rather. New enrollment kits were also given to Elecam officials in the littoral region of Cameroon. The seminar began, that was in the city of Douala. That was today. Let's now have an excerpt of the General Manager of Elections Cameroon, Abdoulaye Babale, was speaking to Simanjikan Gabriel.
The results of different registrations in the 4 regions gathered here. Up till May 18, 2018, respectively, 70,463 electors for the Littoral region, 17,207 electors for the Northwest, then 30,625 electors for the West, and finally, 8,816 electors for the South-West region, representing a total of 127,111 electors nationwide registered since the beginning of registration.
Council officials in Chang West region of Cameroon are now mapping strategies with officials of the French Development Agency to supply renewable energy to the population in that part of the West region of Cameroon. This project is aimed at raising the living conditions of the beneficiaries, as Innocent as it tells us in the following report.
The town of Chang valorizes renewable energy via garbage exploitation. These services at least 6 villages in Chuandem, a vibrant locality in Chang, West region of the country. Streams are also exploited to generate energy. These energy sources, which project as pillar of the electricity project, are funded at over 60% by the French Development Agency. The director of the French Development Agency, Christian Yoka, hails the role the community of Chang plays towards the realization of this energy project.
Ce qui est remarquable dans cette opération pour nous,
the town of Chang, he says, had plans of having stable electricity supply, coupled with its cooperation thanks to its decentralization role.
Hydroélectrique et décidé de le mettre en valeur. Pour nous, ça, ce sont des exemples.
Gilles Thibault, French ambassador to Cameroon, accompanied by the mayor of Chang, visited the different project sites financed by France.
Et je tiens à saluer particulièrement le travail qui est mené par la ville.
This visit enabled the French diplomat gain comprehension on the collection, treatment and management of waste materials to realize the project.
And that brings us to the end of this first segment of the news. Up next is Talking Point. We shall be right back. Good evening to you once again, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you so much for joining us in this second segment of the news. Tonight, we are going to be receiving Mr. Adamu Edward as our guest. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You are, of course, an official of the government Bilingual High School in Bekoko, yes, Douala, and also an actor of the civil society.
That's true.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
The pleasure is mine.
We have this information that just came in a few hours to the primetime newscast was the reaction of the government of Cameroon to the utterances of the U.S. ambassador to the country. A strong-worded communique or a release by the Minister of External Relations, Lejeune Belambela, speaking on behalf of the government of Cameroon. They have talked about the declarations of the U.S. ambassador with regards to the current socio-political crisis in the Northwest and the Southwest. They equally reacted on the presidential elections or elections in the country. Okay. First, to begin with the fact that the government of Cameroon has actually talked about the fact that he has never been imposed as a candidate in the country and that he's been genuinely elected by Cameroonians. What do you have to say about that as a Cameroonian?
Well, I will say that to a certain extent the government is right in saying that it's never been imposed. I think when we go into counting and the results are usually marked out indicates that the government wins. Maybe the procedure may not be the best, but the figures that come out at the end of the day shows that the government has won. Whoever is in power has won. The procedure may have been the problem. So I think the government is very right to say that the present head of state has never been imposed.
Because officially he wins the election.
He wins
but is
officially.
it a reflection of what Cameroonians want?
Well,
because we've always seen opposition party leaders decrying election rigging in the country.
For sure, you must also take note of the fact that even when opposition leaders know that they have failed in one way or the other, they always decry. You can't beat a child and you expect that child not to weep. The opposition leaders will always have to complain. But I think the problem is usually the procedure that leads to the election proper. That's where there's the problem.
Meaning that all is not well, as the government indicated in the release of today.
From what, there is a common saying that the ends justifies the means. It's a term that's used generally in politics, which means that if the results come out that I won, it means that the procedure was good. But I think we need to be very honest with the procedure that leads to the elections proper. That's what is very important. If the majority of those who are of the opposing party do not register, or they do not vote, you don't expect those who went out to vote for the ruling party not to win. Unfortunately, that's the situation. You realize in most parts of the country now, most people do not have the voting cards yet. So at the end of the day, the ruling party knows the strategy.
The results are simply a reflection of those who voted. Now, Mr. Adamu, the fact that a candidate cannot be imposed to Cameroon by any foreign country or the Western world. Yeah. This is coming after the U.S. ambassador a few days ago talked about the need for the head of state to start thinking about his legacy. Do you have the impression that the outing of the U.S. ambassador, which was simply talking about democracy within the African continent and in Cameroon in particular, was somehow disturbing to the Biya regime?
Well, having been in power for all this while, it should be disturbing. But like he indicated, he has never imposed himself. If he's never been imposed, it means the Cameroonians have been asking him to stay. You remember about 3 or 4, 2 Mondays back, there was this clarion call that went all over the different regions of Cameroon that the president...
Calls from CPDM party supporters, to be more precise.
Sure. And if you consider that they are in larger numbers from what they indicate, from what results indicate that are in larger numbers, it therefore means that the call has come from a larger majority of the people. But like I said, who speaks? How do the others who are contrary to that, how do their voices get heard by other people? It also matters. So I think there might be some problem. There is no country in which, there is no perfect country in which everybody will be for or against the head of state. And that one, we must accept that. But I think that in Africa, after you've not put in some number of years, the head of the ambassador might have maybe overspoken. Well, putting in a number of years means you are putting in your best. And if you are putting in your best after a certain number of years, it's probably a bit difficult.
You say the president has put in its best, or
yes.
The regime has put in its
well,
best?
The president...
The Minister of External Relations has actually indicated that the president of the republic is going to be remembered as a symbol of democracy and development in Cameroon.
For true.
For several decades.
Several years.
And what do you have to say about that? Is that the image that you have of the current regime as an actor of the civil society?
Well, I must say that regimes come up with their own objectives. The country there are certain objectives that everybody in society would have expected them to come up. We need to see everybody, the whole society developed. We need to see everywhere as other developed countries are. But along the line, we have other hitches that may come. And how do they refocus themselves? Do they refocus themselves in concentrating on some other thing or in the development of the nation? Some other people will say that, well, his regime has not been the best. Some will say it has been the best. Depending on the perspective from which you look at it, educational-wise, you say, okay, many more schools have come up. But if you look in terms of road infrastructures, you'll say they have rather deteriorated. So the regime can hardly be very perfect. All regimes can hardly be very perfect. But I think that there have been some shortcomings of late in the way the country has been going on.
Only of late. So you've been satisfied so far.
The early days...
It's been 3 decades now. And
yeah,
many Cameroonians are complaining.
I know. You know, let me take you back a few years. Before the present head of state came to power, the road between Yaoundé and Douala was untarred. You must take note of that. He did the tarring. It's true that he's not able to maintain it. We're not talking of auto road. I was also say that lots of schools were not built before this time. The schools have come up, even though the teachers are lacking. So the system in place has been able to do a number of things.
It's good you talked about maintenance on the Douala-Yaoundé highway, because it's been a death trap.
It's really a death trap. That we accept. That at the early stage, he was able to do a number of things. He was able to realize a lot of projects. Let me look at a few airports that were constructed when he came up. But those airports finally were not being used. Let me look at the case of Bamenda Airport. Initially, it was constructed when he came up, but the airport went on for long that it wasn't used. Of late, they've started it again. They started using it. But I think that he realized a number of projects.
And in the southwest, we have the other regions of Cameroon.
Where the other regions have found it very difficult. If you want to look at the past when things were good, it would be rather regrettable. We had the Tico Airport that fared in those days. Foncha and Mona went to United Nations towns to Tico Airport. That today is simply a track where people do farming. It's regrettable. That one we must accept that there have been some failure in that domain. Tico WAF, look at Limbe. Limbe was supposed to be even better than Douala Seaport because it has a deep seaport. The projects for building Douala for Limbe Seaport has never been realized. But we think that, on the other hand, things have been concentrated only in other regions. But we cannot talk of Kribi, but we think that Limbe, which is deep and closer
so
to
to say
people,
that he's a symbol of development and democracy could be an overstatement. Is
it
that
could
what
be
you're
an overstatement, depending on the perspective from which you look at it. If you are within the CPDM, you say, oh, no, it's the best we could have. But if you are from the other side, you say, no. If you are objectively looking at it, you will say maybe it was an overstatement.
Now, talking about the actions of security forces in the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, like you mentioned earlier that Cameroon has been faced with a lot of challenges recently.
Yeah.
One of them is the current socio-political crisis in the northwest and the southwest regions. The President of the Republic, in that release that was signed by the External Relations Ministers, actually declared as unfounded the claims by the U.S. ambassador, which indicated that security forces are carrying out shootings, lootings, and killings, as well as arresting the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon. You have been monitoring the situation as well as an educationist, an actor of the civil society. What have you been able to observe so far as the actions of security forces are concerned?
Well, I must say that it will depend who. It's true it's a government statement, but I must also indicate to you that how does information filter to the head of state? Does it really receive all the information that happens on the field? If really, then there may be some little element of dishonesty here, because I think the world over has seen what has happened in the Northwest. But I must also indicate that we must be very careful what we watch on the social media, because people do manipulate images a lot.
Besides that, there are facts.
But there are facts for that we don't argue. There are many homes have been burned down. Many of us are hosting family members who have run from the different areas, from different villages, and are living in the French-speaking areas because their homes were either burned down or some were killed and other like. That one is certain. But you know, in a situation of war, some of these things are bound to come up. I think Memia will have said that these are things we would have been able to avoid if we had thought otherwise. If we had thought otherwise meaning that if we had reasoned differently that we better declare war, we would have avoided this.
Now, the release talked about the fact that security forces have remained professional in their actions on the ground. But it is contrary to another release that was issued that was few hours before this afternoon, signed by the Secretary General of the Presidency of the Republic, saluting the efforts of the security forces in the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, urging them to work in strict respect of the law in force. Now, saying that security forces on the ground are professional in what they are doing, what do you have to say about that?
I think it's an overstatement here. The Minister of Defense of late came out in a communique where he acknowledged that some of his elements behave very poorly. That was just one of the thousands that we could see. So we should know that. I think the state should be able to accept that we've gone wrong here, and we think that we are working harder to let our soldiers avoid doing this again. The social media carried all the images. We saw what was happening to a human being, dehumanizing others. I think we need to accept honesty alone can save us. If we keep telling lies, we are deceiving ourselves and we are deceiving the other person. Remember, the people dying are Cameroonians. Are we telling Cameroonians that we are not dying, whereas we realize that we are dying? I think that one too, the government needs to be very honest about it.
The U.S. ambassador's outing might have affected the regime of President Pobia so much to have prompted such an outing.
For sure.
Reaction. The U.S. ambassador that was talking about the need for Cameroon to show that example to the outside world as a country that respects human rights and those core values of diplomacy. That was the intention of the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon. What does it tell us about the current regime in the country?
Mimi, I would like to avoid saying that the regime has failed in one way or the other. Like I said, there are other domains in which the regime has succeeded, but there are other domains that the regime has closed its ears to, that is trying to call for dialogue, which has led to the several deaths. Like I said, I would like to repeat this, that if we had thought that we could avoid declaring war, we wouldn't have been where we are. If the ambassador is now speaking to us today, Cameroonians, speaking to us almost like kids, is because we decided to be funny, and that's why our image has been reduced to where we are, and that's why we're being described in the way he said. I think the fault is us. If we had thought that it was needless using force, that we should talk about national dialogue with honesty, we wouldn't have been where we are today. The U.S. ambassador will not step in to talk to us like children.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adamu Edward, for joining us tonight on Talking Point. Yes. We hope to have you some other time again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
The pleasure is mine.
Viewers, it was equally a pleasure having with us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television. Wishing you a blessed stay in the company of our programs. Until we meet again, goodbye.